Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Police, Public Order, Central Cadre under Jammu and Kashmir Lieutenant Governor. We had one of the decisions taken by the central government in the year 2019 that was downgrading the status of Jammu and Kashmir from the state into a union territory. With this, we have a new pattern of governance. We have the lieutenant governor, we also have the council of ministers who would be elected by the people of Jammu and Kashmir. This is a model similar to that which we have in union territories of Delhi as well as in Puducherry. So what do we have? We have the lieutenant governor, we also have the council of ministers. What has the central government done here? The central government has to clearly make sure that there is functions that which is accorded to the lieutenant governor and also to the council of ministers, and that is why we have a notification released by the Ministry of Home Affairs which gives certain functions to the lieutenant governor. It also awards certain functions to the council of ministers. So those functions awarded to the lieutenant governor and to the council of ministers is what this article all about. First, let us understand what would be the functions with respect to the lieutenant governor. We have the powers with respect to the police, public order, all India service and anti-corruption, which will be controlled by the lieutenant governor. Why is that police and public order is placed under the lieutenant governor? That is because the central government senses that there could be certain terrorist activities or there could be instability or infiltration from the outside forces. In order to control this, the central government feels they would be able to do justice, and that is the reason it is awarded to the lieutenant governor. So the police and public order, because they have to make sure peace and tranquility in the union territory of Jammu and Kashmir, this is given to the lieutenant governor, where the center would be also able to command as well. Then we have the all India services. What are these all India services? We have the IAS, we have the IPS, and then we also have the Indian Forest Service. So these forest officers, Indian administrative officers and police service officers will again come under the control of the lieutenant governor. An anti-corruption bureau will also be established, and this will be under the forte of the lieutenant governor. In case there are any other proposals which is disturbing the peace and tranquility in the region of Jammu and Kashmir, or it is taking away certain rights of the minority community, the SC community, ST community and other backward classes, such will also have to be notified to the lieutenant governor. So what are the powers that are given to the council of ministers who are elected in the union territory of Jammu and Kashmir? Service matters of non-all India service officers will be under the control of the council of ministers. When it comes to the all India officers like IAS, IPS and IFOS, it will be under the lieutenant governor, but the non-all India services, that is the state PCS, will be under the control of the council of ministers. What are the other measures that can be taken up by the council of ministers? This includes proposal to impose new taxes, land revenue issues, sale, grant or lease of government property, reconstituting departments or offices under draft legislation. When it comes to the central notification, in case there is any important message given by the central government or it directly comes from the prime minister or any other ministers from the center, such communication, in case it is received and it is of priority, it should also be sent to the lieutenant governor marked by the chief secretary. In case there is any issue taken by the council of ministers and such an issue is in conflict with the center or other state governments, then again this will have to be notified to the lieutenant governor through the chief secretary. So in case of a difference of opinion, the council of ministers would be able to make laws, they would also be able to implement the schemes, and in case of any issue and if it is not sorted out within 30 days, then the ultimate power will be resting on the lieutenant governor. What would be the ultimate decision can only be taken up by the lieutenant governor. In some of the cases, it can also be referred to the president, and whatever the president says, the same will also have to be implemented. We will also take forward this article. We will have more editorials and columns in the near future. Once we have them, we will have an elaborate analysis once again. As of now, this is what we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says national well-being and the counts that matter. This article gives a linkage between women rights, education, and it also gives an idea about the future demographic dividend. Women should be educated as they shoulder the responsibility of the family. There are many factors which actually prevent the women from completing their education. So, what are these factors which prevent the women from continuing or stopping the education? There are three major factors. One is lack of functional toilets. One of the beautiful initiatives taken by the central government is the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. This Swachh Bharat Abhiyan makes sure that there is functional toilets, and with the help of the HRD ministry, now the education ministry, there is also a provision where toilets will have to be constructed in all the rural areas and in schools and colleges as well. But one issue that we have, there is construction of the toilets, but are they functional? Do they have the required water supply? And in few of the cases, the doors are not in a functional scenario. What this means is that women will feel inferior when going to this particular lack of functional toilet, and as a result, the first major issue which is preventing them to heading to a school or to a college in the rural premises or in less urban areas is lack of functional toilets. The second issue is the access to the sanitary patch. Women in the rural fold and also in the tribal heartlands and in poorest and remote sections might not have access to the sanitary patch. This is to do with the dignity of the women. This is to do with the rights of the women and privacy of that women. So what we have to look at is providing this sanitary patch free of cost in certain areas, or it has to be declared tax free as well. Such initiatives will also have to be taken by the government of India. The third issue is with respect to traveling. There is a major constraint in the rural areas, and that is to do with law and order issue. There could be a possibility of sexual violence, and of late we have been seeing increasing cases of rape that is witnessed in certain areas as well. For this, what we require is traveling from the source to the destination, from their village areas to the school areas. That has to be provided by the central government as well as the state government. So what should happen? Because we have the lack of infrastructural support, if infrastructure is provided, what we would see is more number of girls and women entering the fold of education. And at the same time, we also have to educate the boys as well. Why? That is because we have to inform them about gender parity and also about the notions of consent as well. What is happening of late? There is increasing cases of sexual violence, there is increasing cases of rape as well, and this means there is a violation of the body freedom of the women. So what should be taught? Boys should also be taught about gender parity, respect for the women, and this is the most important factor when it comes to the rural areas as well as in semi-rural areas. With this, what we learn is at one side we are providing the infrastructural support to the women so that they continue with the education. On the other side, we also put in the values and ethos to our boys so that they can respect the women and there is gender parity when it comes to the educational sector. This is the first part of this article. The second part of the article is speaking about stillbirth. What is stillbirth? The death of the child in the womb of the mother is what is called as stillbirth. This would mean that the mother would go through a lot of grief and pain after the death of this child in a very womb. What are the possible reasons for this stillbirth and what should the government do in the near future? First point that we have to understand is most of these stillbirths happen in the rural areas. Why? That is because of the lack of awareness. The government might have taken up number of measures, the implementation might have been taken up, but people do not have an awareness that there is a particular health center that would take care of the women. So unawareness of the existing facilities and of the benefits of the medical during the pregnancy was the most common cause according to the statistics. Let's also assume that the women are aware of this healthcare center, but for them to travel from the source to the destination, as we initially discussed, traveling becomes the most important factor. Lack of traveling facilities or no accessibility from their place to this healthcare center is the second major issue when it comes to the stillbirths, says the statistics. Our first point of discussion was about education. We spoke about education is important for the women. Why? Because they would be able to shoulder the responsibility of the family. It is not only the women, it is also the parents who have to be educated. It is also the parents who have to be given the awareness about the ill health of the child marriages. Most of the cases in India are resulting in stillbirth. That is because of early child marriages and early pregnancy as well. Because the girl is not physically ready to conceive and also nurture the pregnancy, this is also resulting in stillbirths. The third argument put forward by the author is with respect to the weight of the child. Let's assume the pregnancy period was successful and the mother has given birth to a beautiful child, but this child has an inadequate weight. What is the issue right now? The mother, when she was pregnant, might not have eaten properly, or the family would not have taken care of the woman, and that ultimately points out to the socio-economic condition of this very woman. So what happens? According to the author, he says in case there is an undernourished, underweight child, if it is born in circumstances, the district authorities and the sub-district authorities will have to collect all these statistics on a regular basis. When this collection of the statistics happen, the same will have to be given to the government, and the government will have to initiate number of steps so that adequate food supply, adequate food and nutritious food is provided to this women. After the pregnancy period, after the child is born, the government will also have to make sure that the mother is able to feed the child the healthy food. The first initial few months, what we require is the breastfeeding. Followed by this, we need to also give the complementary food as well. Then in case there is the vaccine support that is required and treatable illness has to be provided, the government will also have to take the responsibility during this very period. Why? All these children, in case they have inadequate weight, they do not have the nutrition. The problem is that India is bound to suffer. Why? Because these Indian children will be the future demographic dividend, and if this demographic dividend is suffering from malnutrition, India will not have demographic dividend, but it will become a demographic liability, says the author. What is the way forward? As we discussed right now, it is about numbers, it is about collecting statistics, it is about organizing this particular statistics. So the way forward is collecting all the information about the women education, about the number of stillbirths, and also about the weight of the children, so that this can be addressed by the government of India. We are speaking about the national health policy, we are speaking about the new education policy, we are speaking about women empowerment. For all this, what we require is multi-dimensional data. Only when we have the multi-dimensional data with respect to all these aspects, we would be able to understand physical and mental well-being of the individual and also the social attributes in that particular region. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the GST issues between the central government and the state government. We did discuss about this issue in our yesterday's CNA. This article here makes a word called as the force majeure. So what is this word? This is taken from the French word. Let's try and understand what is this term all about. This basically means, according to the dictionary, an event or an effect that can neither be anticipated nor controlled. Let me explain this for you. Let's say, for example, in the present scenario, none of us expected that COVID-19 would strike a world. So that means it is an act of the God, or it is an act of the nature, and such other similar proportionalities like the floods or the hurricanes or the earthquakes or the tsunami all falls under the acts of the nature. So the term force majeure basically means that which is not anticipated when it comes to the contract execution. This can also be with respect to the people as well. Let's say there is a particular proportionality of people who come and engage in a riot. This was not anticipated, or let's say the people in the particular state or in a particular region also call for a total lockdown or band in that particular region. This is also the act of the people. So in all these cases, what we basically see is the act of the nature or the act of the people. In such a scenario, what we actually see is a violation of a contract. So what is a contract? A contract is nothing but that is an agreement between one person to another, but this also has an imprint of law on it. Let me explain this concept with a simple example. Let's say there are two individuals, individual A as well as individual B. They would have entered into a contract. A would have told B that he would be sending around 100 kgs of tomato tomato. So this is what is the agreement, and B would have also paid some amount to A as well. So this tomato truckload should reach B by next day 8 a.m. This is what is the condition that has been laid, that money has been paid so that A can deliver this particular good of 100 kgs of tomato by next day 8 a.m. But all of a sudden, while this transport should have been taken up today so that it reaches tomorrow by 8 a.m., what happens? There is flooding that immediately takes place. So because there is flooding, these transport facilities cannot move in that particular area. So what happens? There is loss suffered by B. This person A, being a businessman, would have inserted this clause called as the force majeure. So what happens? Because he's inserted this clause, because it is an act of the nature, because it is an act of the God, he absolves itself from all liability in case the fulfillment of contract cannot be executed. Why? Because these conditions are beyond his control. Ideally, if things were under his control, he was supposed to pay a liability. But since this particular contract conditions are not under his control, since it is an act of God, since it is the fury of the nature, he need not have to pay back the money for violation of a contract. So what the author says, he links the same with the central government and the state government as well. So what does the author say? The author clearly says that COVID-19 was not expected. Since COVID-19 was not expected, this is an act of the God. This is an act of the nature. Since it is an act of the nature, the central government need not have to pay the state government in the present scenario. So this means it is taking away its liability, says the author. So but according to the author, this should not have been done by the central government towards the state government. This is a time where this will have to be empathized. So what is required? What is the need of the hour? The need of the hour is that central government has more powers to borrow from the market. The state has very limited powers. The state had very limited powers from borrowing from the external sector or from the international organizations. So ideally, according to the author, he says since the central government has more provisions, more options, they should have taken the responsibility of borrowing from the market, and they should have transferred this particular fund to the state governments rather than following this principle of force majeure. What they are supposed to do were take up the responsibility during these testing times and ultimately transfer the same to the state governments. That is why he brings in the concept of cooperative federalism. Cooperative federalism is the need of the hour where there has to be a mutual cooperation between the central government and the state government, and it is not coercive federalism which is required. So what is coercive federalism here? Where the central government is imposing the state governments to do this without their autonomy. That is what is called as coercive federalism. So what was need here? The need was cooperative federalism, where the center could empathize with the cause of the state, take the responsibility and give it to the state governments. But here they have imposed the coercive federalism, where they are asking the state governments to take up the responsibility, says the authors of this very article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. But kindly note, we have already discussed our yesterday CNA, and we will also take this up after 1 week because there would be certain other updates with respect to the GST as well. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about resignation of the Prime Minister of Japan, and that happens to be Shinzo Abe. Shinzo Abe will no more be the Prime Minister of Japan. Why? Because he has his own personal health issues, and as a result he has resigned from the post of Prime Ministership. We would have it for temporary period, but after they have the new Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe would no more be the Prime Minister of Japan. In this particular backdrop, we have to understand two important frameworks. One is with respect to Japan itself, the other is with respect to India as well as Japan. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has the unique distinction of serving Japan for the longest period. Since he was the longest serving Prime Minister of Japan, he wanted to bring massive changes when it comes to the economy of Japan. That is why the economy of Japan is also named as Abenomics. Why? Because most of these reforms wanted to make sure that there is economic revival, there is combined structural reform, monetary easing, fiscal expansion. Why? Because he wanted to make sure that there is more activities that which is inculcated, brought about in the economy of Japan. And when it comes to India and Japan's relationship, he was the first Japanese Prime Minister to be the chief guest at the Republic Day parade in the year 2014. Back in the 2007, Shinzo Abe had visited India. During this particular visit, he had also made a speech about confluence of the two seas. So what is this confluence of the two seas? That is the concept of Indo-Pacific. So what is India banking right now with respect to the free movement of all the important shipments that was initially raised by Shinzo Abe. He was speaking about the joining together of the Indian Ocean as well as the Pacific Ocean, that there should be a free movement of all the ships irrespective of any constraints from any country. The very concept of Indo-Pacific originally was also given by Shinzo Abe. And when it comes to India and Japan's relationship, we already had a number of security and defense agreement and conventions. But what was given boost during the Shinzo Abe regime was the foreign and defense minister meeting, which we also call it as 2+2 meetings. This 2+2 meetings was initiated under the regime of Shinzo Abe. He was also a person who gave rise to the Military Logistics Support Pact between India and Japan as well. And when it comes to cooperation with India on the international front, Japan and India started coordinating in Sri Lanka. They have been working in Africa, and they are also coordinating in Maldives as well. And such an approach of India and Japan can be thanked to Shinzo Abe's approach as well. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Lakshadweep Islands to have more Kerala-born owls to kill rats. Lakshadweep is known for its coconut production, and most of these coconuts are grown organically without much fertilizers or with very minimal supply of fertilizers. Since it is a designed organic zone, use of chemicals for the pest control is a strict no in the area of Lakshadweep. But there is a small issue. What is it? There is a thriving rat population which is playing a havoc when it comes to the coconut yield. There is a loss that is suffered to as much as 30 to 40%, and the major issue is because of the rodent population that is increasing in Lakshadweep. So what are we supposed to do? We are supposed to reduce the rodent population in the Lakshadweep island. But there is a small catch here. As we initially discussed, we cannot use the chemicals to eliminate the rodents. Why? Because this is a designated organic zone. So we require an alternative strategy. A strategy which will not have any of the chemicals used in Lakshadweep. One of the alternative measures that we can employ is what is called as biocontrol measures. So what are these biocontrol measures? Instead of using the chemicals to eliminate these rodents or pests in any of the cases, what we actually use is the natural predator. So this natural predator will start hunting its prey, and ultimately we would make sure that the losses suffered by the farmers are comparatively reduced. So using of predator to kill a pest is what is called as the biocontrol mechanism. In this particular case, the predator happens to be the barn owl, and the pest in this particular case happens to be the rat. So these owls will be used to kill the rats in the present scenario. That is what is the biocontrol mechanism. When we go back to the historical precedents, we also have the British officers who had used this as a tool in the 19th century. There are other examples in Israel as well as in Malaysia where these barn owls were also employed to kill the rats in that particular country. Now you might ask me a question. Why are we using barn owls instead of cats or the rat snakes? The rats in the Lakshadweep Islands live on the treetops. That is why it becomes very tough for the cats or for the rat snakes as well. Why? Because the trees in the Lakshadweep are very close to each other. So the snakes would not be able to jump from one tree to another. And at the same time, the cats might also not be able to climb that far as well. And that is the primary reason barn owls, who happen to be the natural predator and who also have the powerful auditory mechanism, is put into this particular position by the Lakshadweep administration. And from the preliminary examination point of view, the IUCN status of this barn owl is least concern. Also remember, the barn owl is respected as an acolyte of the god Chamundi in Karnataka, and in Bengal it is also revered as the carrier of Lakshmi, the deity of wealth. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Consider the following statements. Bituminous has the highest heat content amongst peat, anthracite and lignite. Lignite is the first stage of transformation from wood to coal. Which of the above statements are incorrect? It is asking for the incorrect statement, so the answer to this is both. Why? Because it is not the bituminous, instead it is the anthracite. And when it comes to the wood to the coal transformation, it is not the lignite, but instead it is peat, which has the very less carbon content, and it is the first stage of transformation from the wood to the coal. Kindly remember, the best coal is the anthracite. It has about 80 to 95% carbon content. It ignites slowly with the blue flame, and it has the highest calorific value. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following are correctly matched? Bangaram Island, Lakshadweep; Sadhubet Island, West Bengal; Sagar Island, Gujarat. Which of them are correctly matched? The answer to this is one only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference as we just discussed. Kindly remember, some of the important islands of Lakshadweep include Kavaratti, and we have Bangaram, Bitra, Chetlet and Kilkan. These are some of the important islands. And when it comes to Sadhubet Island, it is in Gujarat, and when it comes to the Sagar Island, it is in West Bengal. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following reports are released by World Bank? Ease of doing business, ease of living index, global economic prospects, global financial stability report, world economic outlook. The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3 only. Why? Because the other two reports are released by the International Monetary Fund. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, ease of doing business, ease of living index, global economic prospects, logistics performance index, world development report is given by the World Bank, and we have the IMF, which gives fiscal monitor, global financial stability report and world economic outlook. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following add carbon dioxide to the carbon cycle on the planet Earth? Volcanic action, correct; respiration, correct; photosynthesis, this is wrong; and decay of organic matter, this is right. So the answer to this is 1, 2 and 4 only. Now let's look into the next practice question. This is a small clarification from our yesterday's practice question. We discussed about the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. It was said that there are spread over 17 states and 1 union territory. This is according to the 2011 census. This will be right according to 2011 census, but we currently have 18 states. Why? That is because of the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh into Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So today we have about 18 states and 1 union territory. Now let's look into the main practice question. Center-state relationship should be based on cooperative, harmonious and consultative process and not on coercion. Discuss. What do you understand by biological pest control? Illustrate with examples and highlight their limitations. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review, come up with constructive criticism. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.